Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this week's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys making some time to watch the video and spend some time with me. Always very grateful for that. Guys, today we are going to be giving a complete tutorial on rod selection. We're going to be talking about different actions of rods, the techniques and the lures that you need to use on those rods, and why specific rods need to be used with specific lures to really maximize the performance, the lure manipulation, the action, the ability to land the fish. There's a lot to it because fishing rods are sort of like golf clubs, man. Each one of them has a specific purpose. And today, guys, I have got seven of my favorite rod actions out here, and I'm going to go through each one of those actions and sort of, talk about when you want to use them and why you want to use those. I'm also, guys, before we get started here in today's video, just wanted to go over a couple different things. If you guys like the advanced bass fishing and you want to support the channel, some things you can do. First of all, hit that subscribe button. That'll really help out. And also using all the links in the description I put for the video, especially my tackle warehouse links. If you guys use that tackle warehouse link and purchase your fishing tackle, the channel gets a small percentage of a commission sale anytime you buy some, so that's a good way to help out. And also I will put my tackle warehouse rod link in the description for all the different rods out there. If you guys are wanting to get you some rods after this video, using that link's a good way to do it, so I really appreciate it. Okay guys, first of all, let's have a little discussion about rods before we get into this. One of the things, it's like when you're bass fishing, it's like everybody's situation is different as far as the resources they have, how much money they can spend on equipment, rod and reels and tackle and that type of stuff. I know it, I've been there. I've been at a point where I couldn't, I couldn't afford, hardly a cane pole. So I understand balancing your need to have a really good piece of equipment with, how much money you have to spend out there. And that's the good thing about rod selection, and all the rods, like I said, that are in that tackle warehouse link. There's rods out there for everybody's price range, but specifically I'm going to be talking about the Megabass rods. Not that you have to buy Megabass, but I'll be talking more about the action and the length of the rod, so whatever brand you're looking for, you can fall in your price range there. But one thing that I would suggest is like when you're talking about fishing tackle and having fishing tackle, rods and reels, lures, whatever like that, one of the areas that I really feel that it's good to, if you can spend a little bit more money, or if you want to spend a little bit more money, is make that investment into a good rod and reel setup. Because when you have a good rod and reel that feels good in your hand, everything is so much easier. Your ability to impart action on a lure, your ability to make casts, set the hook, fight the fish, everything is dependent upon that rod action. And I think a lot of people, it's like, I've been fishing with people out there that have had really, really cheap rods, like a big old heavy, Shakespeare ugly stick, and then they'll pick up one of my Megabass or something like that, and it feels like a completely different universe. It's like your ability to feel what that lure is doing in the water and react to it and manipulate and put cadence and retrieve on it is accentuated by a higher quality rod. So if you got anything as far as you can put a little bit more discretionary money into it, I would highly encourage it into your rod and reel line. Okay guys, so first of all, let's go through this. Like I said, I've got 7 rods, and I sort of want to go through each one of them and describe, what I use each one for, and, situation with that. Now, the first one I want to talk about is my flipping stick. This is the Megabass Alkalies flipping stick, 7 foot 11 inches long. It's considered a heavy action rod. And like I said, this is one of my workhorse rods here, flipping stick. Now, when you're talking about a flipping stick, guys, don't think or don't try to just limit a flipping stick to flipping and pitching. Obviously, that is what the mainstay for it is you're flipping and you're pitching your lures, jigs, soft plastics, all that type of stuff. That's the main workhorse for it, but there's a lot more to it with that. The flipping stick, guys, besides pitching and flipping, for me, I throw a lot of different baits on it. I'll throw Alabama rigs on it. I'll throw some of my bigger swim baits on it. I'll throw glide baits on it. And one of my favorite things to do is throw a big heavy spinner bait. It's like when I'm throwing like a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce spinner bait, a lot of times it's on my flipping stick, because not only a flipping stick, the action will handle like a 1 ounce lure, is I can like take that spinner bait and I can flip it and pitch it back in tight spots and start working it. When I get a hook, when I get a strike on it, there's so much mass on a big spinnerbait or a glide bait or a big swim bait that in order to hook that fish, you've really got to move that fish, and having the power of a flipping stick behind a swim bait, glide bait, spinner bait, anything like that will really, help you, get those fish a lot more. Another thing that I use a flipping stick a lot is if I'm fishing a frog or something like that. Not necessarily a frog that I have to work, like a walking frog, but more like a popping frog, or a frog that I'm just, reeling straight over pads, or maybe like a buzz toad, something like that. But I'm using the flipping stick when I have maximum power with it. Most of the time, the line size I have on it is anywhere between, about the lightest I use on a flipping stick is 15-pound test Seaguar and VizX, and then I'll go all the way up to 25-pound test fluorocarbon, or even 50-pound test braid, depending upon the technique with it. But the main thing, guys, about the flipping stick is, like I said, it's a really versatile rod, even if you don't think it is. Another good thing to use on a flipping stick is a Carolina rig, because with the Carolina rig, you got a big 4-foot leader a lot of times, and the extra length of the thing can really get your cast out there. Now, one of the things I would suggest, guys, when you're looking for a flipping stick is make sure the handle's not too long. On any of these rods, you've noticed, like on some of mine, I've cut some of the length off on them because I don't want my rod handle to be hitting my forearm. I want it to come up to about this position. So usually I'm using like an 8 to 10 inch handle. I like to cut it down to that. That's my personal preference. Some people don't mind to have the longer handle, but that's, for me, with the feel, I sort of like that. And then also the tip action on a flipping stick is also critical. You don't want like this broomstick where there's no bend on it. And that's why I like this Megabass Alkalis. It's got a fairly decent tip on it, because you want that, it's not a soft tip, but you want that little bit slower tapered tip on there, because when you set the hook, you tend not to tear the fish's mouth quite so much on a hook set. And when you're fighting the fish, it gives you a little bit more, forgiveness when you're fighting that fish. So that's the situation with my flipping stick there. Okay, next one here. This is going to be a little bit similar here. This is what is my glide bait rod, and this one right here is the Megabass Leviathan. Now, this is a very situation technique specific rod. This is an 8-foot rod, heavy action. It's even heavier action than the flipping stick. It's probably another 20% heavier than the flipping stick. It's got a long handle on it, super, super fast, super, super stiff tip on the thing. And this rod right here, the 8-foot heavy action that is heavier than a flipping stick, this is specifically designed for big glide baits and big swim baits. So say, for example, if I'm fishing like the Megabass 10-inch mag draft here, big old honking swim bait like there, you got to have a rod like this that has the power in order to make the cast with that thing and just manipulate it. I mean, this is sort of almost like a saltwater rod, and there's a lot of different rod companies make it, but what you're looking for basically with the big swim bait and the big glide bait is the rod action the next higher up from the traditional flipping stick. So whatever rod manufacturer that you're using, normally the upper end rods there, you have your flipping stick, and then you've got usually one like a swim bait or glide bait rod above that. It's 8-foot heavy action. That's going to be the scenario for those big glide bait and swim baits. And another thing with that, which I don't have it because I don't have a lot of spare reels, when you're using that big glide bait, that big swim bait rod, it's better if you can get a larger reel. You need to have like a larger diameter spooled reel in order to make longer casts with these heavy baits with heavy line. Because a lot of times if you're putting like 25-pound or 30-pound test line on with a big giant swim bait like this, you can cast it all the way down to the spool on a traditional reel. So if you're really serious about glide bait and swim bait fishing, you might want to consider a wide spool reel that holds a lot of line on there. That's going to help you out with that. But that's a real technique specific rod, and that's probably the rod action I do use least. But when I'm fishing the big baits here, that's the one I'm using there. So okay, guys, I'm gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back and we'll continue on with the rods. Okay, guys, we're back. Now we're gonna be talking about what I consider not a flipping stick, but sort of a pitching multiple use rod, which is this. This is the Megabass Perfect Pitch model. This is a 7'2". I call it sort of a medium heavy bait cast rod, 7'2" long. And also, guys, for getting going here, I just wanted to, if you guys are looking for a combo and you want a good reel, you guys may have heard me talking about it, but I had luge reels for like the last 10 years, and I went shopping around because mine are all worn out, and I finally settled on this Okuma X series here. This is the X1000 HA. Guys, I did my due diligence. I had to get them just like you did through Tackle Warehouse, but if you guys are looking for a really nice bait casting reel, this Okuma reel, I'd highly suggest it. I'll put the link in the description of my video, my Tackle Warehouse link, if you guys would like to check one of these out here to set up your bait cast reels with, but rods with. Okay, but anyway, 7'2" medium heavy. This is the Megabass Perfect Pitch model here in the Levante series. Now, this is another rod category that's sort of in its own. When you're talking about a rod over 7 foot long that is a medium heavy action rod, this again is a multi-use rod. And one of the things about it, aside from the glide bait and the big swim bait rod I talk about, most of these rods that I'm talking about here are multiple use rods, and a 7'2" medium heavy falls into that line. So this is what I use the 7'2" medium heavy for. It's really good for a lot of different things. I use it for light pitching and flipping. This would be a situation to say, for example, I'm pitching, say, a Cinco on an 1/8 ounce sinker up underneath the boat dock, or something. Maybe I'm pitching and flipping a little 5/16 ounce finesse jig, you know, some type of downsized plastic where I'm using a little bit lighter line. Because what this does, if I'm using a jig with it or something like that, it allows me not only to pitch and flip the bait, but allows me to skip it good too. A flipping stick that's over 7.5 feet long doesn't really skip that good, but the 7'2" rod model is perfect for skipping up under docks and overhanging trees and that type of stuff. Another situation with that is, I'll just sort of go along the list here what I use it for. The 7'2" medium heavy is probably my #1 spinnerbait rod for most of my spinnerbait fishing, aside from like the big ones there. Anything like 1/4 ounce spinnerbait up to 1/2 ounce, this is my favorite rod for that. I'll also use this thing like on a fluke or sluggo, something like that is really good for it. It's also can be pretty good. You can use it on a heavy topwater that you reel in, something like a buzzbait or a whopper plopper can be really good on it. It's really good for casting, just casting a Texas rig. So if I'm using, I get anywhere between like just casting the Texas rig weightless Cinco or casting a 10-inch worm on a 5/16 ounce sinker, like fishing it deep, this is the rod I use it on. Now the thing with that is like when I'm fishing deep structure, say for example, I'm fishing a jig and spoon or maybe a big swim bait that I'm crawling along the bottom, a hair jig, something like that, you know, jerking a spoon up off the bottom like a big flutter spoon. This would be a really good rod for that as well. So a lot of this rod right here, actually, if you were like a budget fisherman and didn't want to spend much on fishing, you could probably get by with every technique on this 7'2" medium heavy. You could fish crankbaits on it, you could fish topwater, you could pitch and flip with it, you could chatterbaits, whatever. This is probably the most versatile rod in terms of what you can do with it. Now, that being said, there are also some limitations with it, because when you're using a 7'2" medium heavy, the tip on it is a little bit stiffer, maybe a little bit too stiff for certain techniques. So say for example, if you're fishing a crankbait, I don't really like the 7'2" medium heavy for a crankbait because the tip's a little bit too stiff on it, and I feel that the fish react to it a little bit more. You lose a few fish on it. So I don't really like this rod that much for like a pure reaction bait where I'm reeling the bait fast, because when you're reeling the bait fast on a reaction bait, you want a little bit softer tip on it for a give, and the 7'2" medium heavy doesn't really have that. It's more for just pure power along those lines. But again, that is super versatile rod with that. Also, that rod, the 7'2", guys, is also a really good rod for fishing a frog or something like that on braided line. It's stiff enough where you can get the power, yet it's light enough where like on a frog, you can work it like a spook or something like that. So that's my choice on that. Okay, guys, the next one, we'll get into, got 2 more bait casters and we'll get into spinning. Next one is what's called, this is the Megabass 110 Special. This is a 6 foot 11-inch rod, and it's a medium action rod. So this is a little bit different than the Perfect Pitch. It's not quite as long, and it's got a lot softer tip on it. It's not near as of a stiff of a rod. This rod right here is primarily the one that I use for my crankbait fishing a lot. Depends on the crankbait. I got one other rod here I do some cranking with, but for most of my crankbaits, like square bill crankbaits, medium running crankbaits, even some deep divers at times, this is going to be my choice. This is actually a jerkbait rod that Megabass makes, but I use a spinning rod for all my jerkbait fishing. But if you like to use a baitcaster, this would be the situation with it. So good crankbait rod, and it's also the rod I use for most of my topwaters that I have to put some cadence on it, because since this is a lighter rod, it's a little bit shorter handle on it. It allows me to put lots of wrist action on it. The rod's light enough and short enough where I can throw like a Xerospook out there, or some type of a bait that I need to walk to put action on it, or even a jerkbait when you're jerking a jerkbait. This is necessary to have these shorter, lighter rods anytime that you are trying to manipulate a lure and you're trying to create action yourself on it. So this would be my number one, setup for that. This type of rod, a 6'11" medium action, I don't use it for anything that requires a lot of powerful hook set on it, because the rod's a little bit too soft. So I would never use it on any type of single hook like a jig or worm. It's all for treble hook lures, mainly topwater, and crankbaits with that. Okay, and the final one, guys, the final bait caster before we get into spinning, this is the Megabass launcher. This is a 7 foot 11-inch rod. This is sort of another specialty rod, and it's sort of a composite rod with a pretty soft tip on it. You can see right there. So this is sort of unique. It's a long rod, like again, almost 8 foot long. I consider it sort of a medium action rod, maybe medium, slightly medium heavy, but it's got more of a medium tip on it. Now, this right here, guys, is my chatterbait rod. One of the things you'll find out about bladed jig fishing and chatterbait fishing is that you do not want to use a stiff rod. You want to use a rod that's got some tip on it like this. So the reason I like this for a chatterbait, it's got a soft tip, yet it's long enough to give me a lot of leverage and power on the hook set and for casting. So chatterbait fishing, this is my number one. Also, I will use this rod on a big deep diving crankbait, something like a DD22, that Megabass Deep 6, the Strike King 6XD. A big long rod like this, the length on it allows me to get the cast on it. And also, when you're using a rod that's almost 8 foot long like this, let's say for example, you make a cast with a crankbait out there and you get a strike way out there. When you set the hook with a long rod, you can take up a lot of line on the hook set. So it's a really good situation for that. But so this is mainly my, again, chatterbait and crankbait rod, a chatterbait, big crankbait rod. And also I will use this sometime with braided line on a buzzbait or a whopper plopper. It works pretty good with that. Okay guys, take a quick break and then we're gonna get back into the 2 spinning rods here, and then we'll be wrapping it up. So I'll be right back. Okay guys, let's get into spinning rods now. There's 2 different spinning rods I use, and there's really 2 different type of spinning rod actions that you need for most of your spinning rod fishing. The first one, guys, this is the Megabass Orochi Shaky Head Special. This is a 7 foot, I consider it a medium action, maybe a little bit on the medium heavy side like that. 7 foot rod, medium heavy action rod. And this guys, what I use here is when I'm using the Shaky Head Special, a lot of it is just for what it says on a shaky head. The reason that I like a little bit longer rod, like a 7 foot rod that's got a little bit stiffer tip on it, that's not quite as, the tip's not quite as stiff on it, are the lures that I have to set the hook on with light line. So when I'm using like a shaky head, something I have to penetrate with, maybe a little finesse jig, I fish a floating worm a lot of times on this rod here. Anything that requires a little bit of power on the hook set, can be anything out there. Normally a single hook lure, I go with the 7 foot model, medium heavy out there. You need a little bit line, because sometimes you have techniques out there where you're fishing finesse, again, like a shaky head or a jig or something like that, and you need to use lighter line, but you still need a little bit of power with it. So this is a perfect situation with that. And the thing about a 7 footer, guys, is like when you're talking in terms of like lure manipulation with a spinning rod, 7 footer is a little bit more awkward because it is a little bit heavier, a little bit longer. That's why I don't use the 7 footer when I'm really trying to impart a lot of action. Most of the time it's on something that I'm just shaking in one place like that, or I'm dragging it, or I'm just hopping it off the bottom, something like that, Ned rig, shaky head, anything like that. This is the main one for that. Out of the 2 spinning rods that I'm talking about here, I probably use this one I'm going to talk about right now 80% of the time, and only 20% of the time on the shaky head special. This one right here, guys, you hear me talk about it a lot. This is my #1 rod, period. I probably use this rod more than any other rod out there. This is the Megabass Whip Snake. It's a 6 foot, 11 inch medium action spinning rod. And guys, this is my workhorse. I do so many things with this spinning rod here. If you could just buy one spinning rod or one rod after this video, this is what I would suggest, guys. A 6 foot, 11 inch medium action spinning rod, like this Whip Snake here, because it allows you to do everything. This is the rod I use for all my jerkbait fishing. The only jerkbait I do not throw on this is like a 7 inch jerkbait, like that Canada or big giant jerkbait. Other than that, all my jerkbaits get fished on this. All my small crankbaits get fished on this. If I'm using a shaky head or like a small shaky head, like a little 4 inch shaky head with a small hook in it, or a little Ned rig or something really, really light, I'll use this on that particular one when I don't have to have a good hard hook set because the wire is so small on it. Again, I'll still use the floating worm on this sometimes, and drop shot, all that type of stuff. Just whatever finesse techniques you're using. Little swim bait, like a little 3 inch swim bait with a little 1/8 ounce head on it. This is the rod I use for that. But like I said, crankbaits, jerkbaits, little finessey stuff that you can't really go wrong with that. So anyway, guys, that is the 7 different rods that I use right there. Now, talk a little bit about what you want to look for. I mean, if you're wanting to buy some or thinking about setting up on there, first of all, a lot of it has to do with what you need out of it. I mean, if you're not a tournament fisherman, unless you're just loaded and have a lot of money, there's no need to have a bunch of rods. You can do so much stuff with just a few rods. If you don't fish tournaments and you're on a budget, the 3 rods I would recommend would be like that 7 foot 2 inch medium heavy, that perfect pitch, and then the Whip Snake spinning rod like that, and then the flipping stick. Those 3 rods right there, you can do about anything in bass fishing with those 3 rods. They may not be perfect for every technique, but they're serviceable. If you're a tournament fisherman and you have to specialize with certain rod actions, those are the 7 that I'd recommend, because one of the things about rods that you have to, there's more than one element in play here, because when you're talking about selecting the right rod, #1, it's got to feel good to you. And even a rod that is inexpensive and maybe not be the best rod, yeah, you're going to get used to it eventually. It may feel a little awkward at first, but you're going to get used to it. But one of the things that you really need to pay attention on with a rod is the weight of the rod and how the rod is balanced. That has a lot to do with how much of an extension the rod is of your own arm, because ideally you want the rod just to be an extension of your own body, and the lighter and the more well balanced it is, the more that's going to do that. Another aspect is, which is probably the most key part in my mind as far as if I had to rate them, would be getting the right rod length and the right rod action to put the correct type of retrieve and cadence on your bait. So baits that require action, like a walking topwater or a jerkbait, or maybe some type of a crankbait stop and go retrieve, a fluke, something like that. Any type of lure that requires manipulation from the wrist on your part, it's very, very important to have the right tip on it and the right rod length, because if you've got a rod that's too long, you simply can't make those quick snaps, and you don't have the crispness and the reaction that you would on a little bit shorter rod. Now, the shortest rod that I talked about here was the 6 foot 11 inch. That is as short as I go. I don't go anything shorter than 6'11". 6'11" is plenty short enough to get all those, the reaction with that. Another big consideration, guys, is the overall taper of the rod, as far as how stiff the butt section is and how soft or how stiff the tip is. Now, the tip stiffness or how soft it is, it not only has something to do with how the action of the lure looks, as far as the how you manipulate the lure. Because, for example, if you jerk hard on a soft tip rod, the lure is not going to react the same as if you jerk quick on a stiff tip rod. So that's one consideration. But the other considerations are your casting distance and the ability to fight a fish out there. You're always going to be able to cast further and longer with a longer rod, and you're also going to be able to fight fish better on a soft tipped rod. So a stiff tipped rod is the worst rod that you can have for actually fighting a fish. You're going to lose a lot of fish fighting fish in open water with a stiff tip rod. So if you can get by with it and you're using lures that have small hooks or treble hooks on it, it's always better to go with a little bit softer tip on there. And the only time that I use powerful rods that have stiff tips on there is when I need to move the fish, like move the fish out of heavy cover or move the fish that has a big bait in its mouth. So when I'm just wanting pure power is the only time that I use a real stiff rod with that. Ultimately, guys, it's just got to feel good to you. I mean, if you like it and something feels good to you, then do it. One final thing that I'll throw in there is handle length a little bit. If you notice, a lot of the rods that I use, I've cut some of the length off the handles. Now, I'm not saying this is not. A lot of people don't want to buy a new rod and cut part of the handle off of it. But the thing about it, excuse me, any rod manufacturer out there, they can't make a bunch of different handle sizes. They have to make what they consider to be the most popular handle size out there based upon what that rod's designed to do. But everybody's body's different. It's like everybody has different length arms and different degrees of strength out there. So one of the things that I found very helpful is get you a hacksaw and cut that handle off incrementally to where it's comfortable to you. If you like it the way it is from the factory, great. If not, don't feel hesitant to cut a little bit of it off of there, because if you plan on keeping that rod for a long time, it's definitely gonna, be more conducive to you to have a rod that feels right with that. So again, that's just one of the things. Every company can't like cater to every single angler's taste on there. It's just an individual preference on handle length. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Shoot me some comments if you guys have any questions. And again, if you guys are looking for some rods, if you guys use that Tackle Warehouse link in my description, that's a really good way to help out. And we'll see you guys next week. See you.